So moving on from vision, we have audition. Mechanoreceptors transduce sound waves and then convert the mechanical energy of the sound waves into neural impulses, which are then sent to the brain. There are three parts to the ear. The first is the outer ear, and the outer ear collects sound. The structures of the outer ear are the auricle or pinna. That is the external ear that collects sound waves from the environment. Then is the external auditory canal. That is the tube that carries collected sound waves to the middle ear. And then the tympanum or the tympanic membrane is the eardrum. The eardrum is the border between the outer and the middle ear, and it vibrates with the force of the sound waves that have gone into the external auditory canal and then transmits those sound waves to the structures of the middle ear. An outer ear infection is also called swimmer's ear. So that's when there is an infection in the outer section of the ear. Moving to the middle ear, the job of the middle ear is to amplify sound. So the structures of the middle ear are the ossicles. The ossicles are the three tiny bones in the middle ear. These are the malleus, or called the hammer, the incus, also called the anvil, and the stapes, also called the stirrup. The ossicles amplify the sounds 10 times, and they transmit the sound to the inner ear. The oval window is the border between the middle and the inner ear. So this is what the ossicles basically bump up against. And as the membrane of the oval window moves, the fluid inside the cochlea moves. And then there's also the round window. The round window decompresses acoustic energy in the cochlea. And as the oval window is pushed in, the round window is pushed out. There's also the eustachian tube. The eustachian tube connects the middle ear to the nasopharynx. The job of the eustachian tube is to equalize pressure in the middle ear with the air pressure outside the body. The eustachian tube can contribute to middle ear infections. If the eustachian tube becomes blocked, it can cause fluid to build in the middle ear. That fluid can become infected. It's more common in children because the eustachian tubes are narrower and more horizontal, so fluid is more easily collected and more prone to infection. If ear infections are very common, often that's treated with tympanostomy tubes, which equalizes the pressure. So that would be an individual who has tubes put in their ears. So a little tube is put within the eardrum, and that helps to equalize the pressure between the middle ear and the external environment and reduces those ear infections. These videos are of the outer ear, and by watching the videos, you are able to see the eardrum. And in the video to the right, that blue structure is actually one of those tubes. Typically, when an individual has tubes, the tubes eventually are pushed out of the eardrum anywhere between 9 months to about 12 months after they've been inserted. And usually that's enough time for the child to have grown enough and for the eustachian tubes to maybe have developed more. So after that point, usually there's no need for a repeat of having tubes put in. And normally they just fall outward and they end up in the external auditory canal and will oftentimes just fall out and they're never found. When I was young, I had tubes put in and I was 4 years old. And we just assumed that they had fallen out and everything was fine as I got older. And then when I was in college, I could actually hear a rattling in my head. And when I went to the doctor, they found that I still had a tube that had actually fallen into my middle ear and it is still there. And so that's what you see in that video. You see that blue structure that is one of the tubes that was placed in my ear over 40 years ago. So moving to the inner ear. The inner ear is where the cochlea is found, and the cochlea is filled with fluid and mechanoreceptors called hair cells. And the cochlea functions in transduction. So the vibrations that have gone through the tympanum and have been transferred from the ossicles to the oval window are now vibrating within the cochlea. And those vibrations bend those mechanoreceptor hair cells. That causes the release of neurotransmitters, and that mechanical energy is converted to neural impulses. Our cochlea breaks down the sound by frequency, and the brain knows the frequency based on which neurons are firing. And so in that cochlear animation at the bottom of the screen, that gives you an idea of how that occurs. So then those neural impulses are then transferred to the cochlear nerve, also called the auditory nerve, which transmits those neural impulses to the brain. Also in the inner ear, we have the vestibular system. So even though this is in the inner ear, it does not function in hearing. The vestibular system is the sensory system for balance, spatial orientation, and coordination. So the structures are the semicircular canals. These are filled with fluids and mechanoreceptor hair cells. These mechanoreceptor hair cells are different than what's found in the cochlea, but it does still function because of movement. And so movement of the fluids in the semicircular canals will bend hair cells. And this causes the release of neurotransmitters. Those mechanical energy is then converted to neural impulses and sent to the brain through the vestibular nerve. So movement will cause that fluid in the semicircular canals to move, and that movement is then sensed and sent to the brain. And how the fluid is moving will then, in the brain, be perceived as how you are actually moving. So this is a video that you can watch about how that vestibular system functions. And then moving on to the somatosensory system. The somatosensory system primarily consists of cutaneous receptors in the skin. And so that would be mainly mechanoreceptors, but also nociceptors and thermoreceptors. And the sensations that they can determine would be pressure and stretch, vibration, itch, pain, and temperature. So then finally, the developmental aspects. So first, all of the special senses are functional, at least to some degree at birth. Chemical senses, so gustation and olfaction, there's few problems with these senses until about your age 30. And then at that point, the senses slowly begin to decline. Taste perception dramatically fades around age 50, and that's due to a loss of tongue papillae, as well as a general decrease in saliva production. Smell perception dramatically fades after age 70, and that's due to a loss of nerve endings in the olfactory epithelium and reduced mucus production. Regenerative ability of the neurons of your chemical senses are high. So if there's damage to the taste buds, if there's damage to some of the olfactory epithelium, there is the ability for those sensory neurons to regenerate. Vision, while there is vision, it's not fully functional at birth. Eye movements are uncoordinated, but that improves and depth perception is developed by age 5. At birth, it's mainly grain tones that can be seen. Color vision develops by age 5. And at birth, vision is hyperopic, but that near vision corrects itself by about age 6. Through the aging process, the lens will lose clarity, the dilator muscles become less efficient, and visual acuity drastically decreases by age 70. The regenerative ability of visual neurons is low, and so damage to these neurons often results in permanent vision loss. Development of audition. Hearing is fully developed by 6 months. Early problems with hearing can lead to speech and language development problems. And so oftentimes infants who have had ear infections, that can impact how well they've been hearing, and they can actually have speech and language development problems because of that. Neurons can be damaged or destroyed by infection, loud noise, medication, disease. Common reversible causes of hearing loss: impacted earwax or perforated eardrum. However, neurons that have been damaged or destroyed by infection, noise, medication, or disease, they often do not regenerate. So hearing loss by those means is often permanent. So regenerative ability of neurons is low. Age-related hearing problems. Presbycusis is age-related hearing loss. This often happens because the ossicles harden. That makes high-frequency sounds harder to detect, and background noise is hard to filter out. Tinnitus is persistent ringing or other ear noise that can sometimes develop in individuals. Development of vestibulation. Aging brings degeneration of the hair cells and neurons, and so that balance, coordination that is being controlled by the vestibular system can decline. And then development of the cutaneous sensation. Aging can bring about degeneration of neurons, slower transmission of impulses, increased sensitivity to light touch because of thinning skin, overall decreased sensations, such as decreased temperature sensitivity, decreased detection or vibration or pressure, decreased sensitivity to pain. Reduced sensations could be due to decreased blood flow to nerve endings, lack of nutrients, or even side effects of other health problems.